The way you perceive your salespeople needs to change. Okay. They are just not these racehorses or these greyhounds that you can whip and whip and whip and whip. Okay. And they're just going to keep running and running and running and running. People don't work like that, right?
You're listening to KBcast, the cybersecurity podcast for all executives. Cutting through the jargon and hype to understand the landscape where risk and technology meet. Now, here's your host, Carissa Breen.
Ed, welcome to the show. I'm actually really excited to have you on the show today. We are recording this on a Friday before we get out of lockdowns. It's definitely brightened my day and my week because you say things so directly, honestly, and you just tell people how it is. And that's why I wanted to bring you on the show today to talk about something that I believe there's still airy-fairy, not sort of cut to the chase type of speak. So I want to get yourself on the show to speak about that. But before we get into that, we always like to start off with talking about you and our journey. So please, Ed, tell everyone a little bit more about your journey and what you've sort of been up to.
First and foremost, thanks for having me on, and thanks for such a an energetic welcome. So where do we begin? It's interesting. So obviously, as you know, I run a sales as a service business, and we represent all different industries, and at the moment, heavily involved in IT and cybersecurity. But my journey kind of started in a totally different space. So, back in, I guess, 2002, 2003, I was actually an aspiring athlete, and I was brought up actually in the housing commissions of Western Sydney. So, it's just kind of me and my mum. And I kind of, growing up, ignorantly thought that I would be this superstar basketball player, right? So pretty cliche kind of stuff. And, as the old kind of cliche story goes, you get hurt, you get injured, and you need to go and get a job. So for me, where it all started is, the area in the neighborhood that I grew in, there was not a lot of opportunity, and there's still not a lot of opportunity out there. But I was very fortunate that one of my good friends, he came up and he said, "Hey, do you want a job in a call center?" And I said, "Are you kidding me? That sounds like a dream." Because I guess I had put all my eggs in one basket. So he got me a job, actually, fortunately, working at TAFE, New South Wales. And I would have been about 19, 20 years old, 18, 19 years old, and just taking phone calls, answering questions about courses. And I never really knew it at the time, but this really shaped the way that I sell and the way that I run my business. Because where I actually really started my career was in customer service, which was listening to people's problems, listening to what people want to do and where they want to go in their life or in their career, and then actually pointing them in the right direction. So, from a young age, speaking to people a lot, helping them solve their problems, taking inbound inquiries, dealing with a lot of complaints, dealing with frustrated people, and, just realize that at the end of the day, if you listen to people and you take on board what they're trying to do with their life, all you need to do is really bridge the gap between where they are and where they want to be. So where it really started taking off, though, is as my kind of career progressed and I studied and all the rest of it, I actually got involved in financial markets. So that's where I really actually started my selling career. So back in 2010, 2011, a friend of mine who actually had played basketball with, he said, "Ed, you talk so much and you're very competitive, and you've got a background in finance and accounting. You should come and work at this investment firm with me." And in that investment firm, we were selling research and we were selling funds to just everyday people, right? And because it was 2010 and it was after the GFC, I had noticed something really interesting. I was kind of brought into this firm, sorry. And there was all these, elder statesmen. People had been doing this for a long time. And after the GFC, I noticed that the way that they were selling was no longer working, right? This hot and heavy, Gordon Gekko, Wolf of Wall Street, egotistical way to selling, it just stopped working for them. And the reason is, of course, as we know, is that after the GFC, consumers got jaded. Trust kind of fell out of the floor. Um, but what I did notice was that just because the trust wasn't there, it didn't mean that people didn't want to do something. But you had to, I guess, instead of treating them as a red hot lead, you had to treat them as a customer already. You had to give them customer service, and that's where my kind of, I guess, my approach, which was really criticized initially for not being too aggressive, and not being too Wolf of Wall Street. That's where my approach of listening to people, adding value to them, revealing your hand before they even have to ask for it, being totally transparent, warts and all. It really kind of propelled me, in my career. From there, I was asked to. Um, from there, I was asked to uh, start my first business venture with somebody who had kind of taken notice of my approach. So we started a property investment company in 2013, in which, quite incredibly, we were selling property to investors who had never met. Right, this is really fascinating. We had never met them in person. We had spoken to them. Um, we send them in the information that they need. We respect where they were in their journey. And these people were buying property off of us essentially via the internet or via a phone call, which was quite incredible. So, again, just taking a customer centric, transparent approach, giving people the benefit of the doubt that if they have all the information that they need, the likelihood of them transacting in your favor, increases dramatically. So, long story short, fast forward a few years, um, my business partner, Nicholas, my current business partner, at that time in his entrepreneurial journey, he had started a small boutique investment firm. And he came to me and he said, hey, Ed, look, I've set up this business and I need to scale my sales team and I need you to kind of come in and consult. So what actually ended up happening is I started just kind of randomly by chance around 2015, developing this reputation as a sales consultant. And I started realizing the same problem across every industry I went through, whether it was media, whether it was IT, selling software as a service, selling finance, whatever it was, we had the same problem over and over and over and over and over. So then, my business partner, Nicholas, said, hey, you know what? We should actually take what you do and this kind of formula that you have, which is not a cookie cutter. It's a formula that does need to be tweaked from, solution to solution, industry to industry. And can we offer it as a service? So essentially, since 2017, we've been offering sales as a service and taking a very kind of customer centric approach that is, I guess, breaking all the traditional rules of sales, if that makes sense. But it's a human approach. It's sustainable because sales reps don't get burnt out. Prospects are having a good experience, not a negative sales experience, and clients are winning. And essentially, that's the short version of a long story. I hope that makes sense.
I love that. I love your story. It's always interesting because a lot of the people that are super successful have come from similar backgrounds to yourself. So I think that hats off to you. Well done. Like I
Thank you.
said, I've when I first met you, I could build that rapport with you, and there's not a lot of people out there, so I think it makes sense that you're doing the type of role that you're doing now. And then one of the things that kept coming up for me when you're talking that really stood out were like the red hot lead. Like I know exactly what you're talking about, that real Mad Men style, like get on the phones, call 1,000 people in 5 minutes, that type of ridiculousness, the too aggressive approach. And the way in which like people are selling across any industry is really antiquated. So that's why I wanted to bring you on the show because, I mean, you
Mm.
obviously work with cybersecurity clients. You are across from a sales perspective in general what works, what doesn't work. I mean, that's probably how I got into doing what I'm sort of doing today because a lot of people in our space really struggle on the sales, marketing, building trust, all of that type of front. And so then when I met you and what you guys do, I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is definitely going to enforce what KBI does because you can't have marketing without sales, right? And this is the area that I really want to get into because I've been in the space for a while. And I mean, I don't know. Let's just, what do you think about it? Like, just tell me everything that comes to mind. Like, where do we start? Because I feel like there's so much work to be done in this space. And again, people are taking this approach that you were sort of saying, these older statesmen, old mates, sort of thinking that their approach in the 80s, 90s
Yeah.
are going to work. So I want you to just be honest, right? Because people listening to this are like,
Okay.
well, I need to get my sales team to actually sell better, and potentially you don't need 50 people to run a sales team. You actually may need less people. So tell me everything.
Okay. Well, geez. Okay. So I'm going to just kind of a bit of a caveat here. The insights that I'm going to provide today, for all intents and purposes of this podcast, are kind of going to be more relative to the southern hemisphere, and because that's actually got a lot to do with where this started. So, one thing at Sales Inc., I'm not going to name any names. We're kind of like people treat us like sales mercenaries. So they take us and they bolt our processes and our teams and our team members onto their business. So it's kind of like we respect our clients' privacy. So we don't. I'm not going to name any names or who we're working with, but I'll tell you kind of, I guess, how I fell into cybersecurity, and I guess some of those differences. So I had a gentleman essentially who was rolling out a tremendous product, great product, and just met him over lunch, introduced by a mutual friend, nothing crazy. You start talking about business. Oh, what do you do? What do you do? And I was so in love with what this guy was trying to do, because at the core of it, he was trying to actually fundamentally help people. And I went back and I said, oh, that's awesome. Love what this guy's doing. I'm a fan. I'm going to follow him. And I just looked at actually his selling process. And I scratched my head and I said, oh, this is terrible. This is like an injustice on what this person and what this organization stands for. And I'll tell you where it first started with. They took a very, as you put it, a madman approach, which was just like, you want to create these funnels and you want to smash people in these funnels, and it's call to action, call to action, call to action. And then we're going to get somebody to call them from another country and we're going to smash them, smash them, smash them. And it's a numbers game. And yes, it is a bit of a numbers game, but there's one difference. When you're trying to sell your solution in Australia, you've got to remember something. What's the population out here? Like 25 million max, right?
Tiny.
And tiny. So you can't play the 2% game out here. You can't play the game that they play in the US or in North America, where it's like you go out there and you take a shotgun approach, right? Or a machine gun approach, I should say, and you try to mow down your market. And as long as we can get 1% or 2% of the market, we'll be billionaires. Doesn't work like that in Australia. In Australia, you've got less room for failure. It's a very, very small, condensed business community, right? Everybody seems to know everybody. And you actually have to be really delicate and maximize your opportunity. So from our standpoint, that was the first thing that jumped out for me, which is like, man, like, why is it that anyone that's in IT or in cyber, they're obsessed with playing this numbers game, as opposed to nurturing their audience, adding value to their audience, engineering trust, building trust, doing it in a very kind of ethical, transparent way, respecting that the people on the other end of the call are actually just people and not a number. And actually,
Oh my
back
God,
to the
yes.
customer service thing. And actually just, we've got values here. And one of those values is everyone is a customer, even if they're not, and it's really interesting to me, the psychology of people. So, I could try to sell you something, Carissa, and what, am I going to treat you a certain way when you're a prospect, but then treat you all of a sudden differently when you're a client? It was always very bizarre to me. And so that's first and foremost. And I think, I guess where our mentality changes over here, as I mentioned, kind of a bit of a cliche underdog story. I acknowledge that. But because sales has kind of been so good to us as well, and has given us a pathway and has allowed us to work with some of the best professionals in the world and the biggest businesses in the world and some of the most inspiring startups, your selling has to be treated with respect. So if you're not treating the people with respect, if you don't have a respectful process that is, and you're not taking the same value set into your prospects that you take into your clients, then it's tough and it's ugly, and salespeople look bad, and cybersecurity professionals in particular have a really, really, really bad experience. And then we're actually all doing ourselves a disservice, because I want to, you want to sell something. Trust me, these people do want to buy something. They do want to improve. They do want to improve their programs. They do want to improve the quality of their cybersecurity, again, teams, programs, whatever it might be. So, everybody just, to put it frankly, let's just chill out and let's reimagine the way that we're going to communicate with people. But let's first and foremost remember that they are people. So that's where I start always.
It's so true though, because I've been banging on this for years. So why do people just disrespect people? I know exactly what you mean because I've been on every side of the coin. I've been a client. I've been in consulting. I understand what exactly it's like because when I moved out of CBA and I moved in consulting, it's like no one wanted to know me then. And then I say to people when they start their own businesses because I don't know, they worked at ANZ Bank or somewhere like that. It's like people will treat you differently. You watch and they're like, "Oh my God, you're so right." And so I want to get into this because people really need to hear this. Now, I can say this because I know CIOs, CTOs, CISOs, they come and complain because people are haranguing them in the market. And if they went to any conference,
Yes.
they'd stalk them, right? And we don't need to operate like that. It looks desperate. It looks cheap. And honestly, everyone's over it. And then they actually do a disservice for their brand. And then that salesperson they're just out the door within 3 to 6 months. And I'll get into that in a second. But this is the frustrating part because I've seen it. I've advised people to stop doing that and they keep doing it. So why are people doing it still?
That's a great question. I mean, there's so many questions in there, by the way. So let me just backtrack for a second. So as you put it, so you went from CBA into consulting and you went from, we've got to speak to Carissa to, who the heck are you? And
Yeah.
I think the first thing you've got to remember is that...
No, it went to people ignoring me because like, "Oh, you're trying to sell me something?" And it's like, actually, I'm not.
yeah.
It went to that. So that
Yeah.
automatically respect was lost because I potentially was valuable to people when I was at CBA, but all of a sudden you go to the other side and it's like, "Oh, I don't care anymore, sorry."
Exactly. So there's two things. If you've got a big brand behind you, and I say this with all great respect, nothing against the big brands, but when you've got big brands behind you, it's easy to just simply rely on leveraging that brand. Sometimes you think kind of that's enough to get a foot in the door and progress the deal and make the deal happen. Yes, it is enough to get a foot in the door at times, and it does help having a big brand behind you. But you've got to kind of remove that mentality first and foremost, right? You've got to kind of humble yourself and say, okay, how do I add value? And it's interesting, right? Because a lot of these, small to medium-sized enterprises or businesses that are on the cusp of being a big brand but aren't quite there yet, they actually forget that the big brands do a lot to nurture their audience, to add value to their audience, right? So if I can pull this back for a second, I would say that's the first thing, right? Is you've just kind of got to humble yourself and say, listen, I'm going in, it's a one-to-one conversation. It doesn't matter, no ego, whether I got a big brand behind me, whether I used to have a big brand behind me, whatever it is, we've got to lose this mentality. We've got to lose this kind of mentality that drives this madman approach. And I'll tell you this as well. I can stand by this wholeheartedly. We have spoken to thousands of cybersecurity professionals in the last 18 months alone across a variety of different products. We've never had one single complaint. And the reason we haven't had a single complaint and the reason we're able to generate sales outcomes is because, first and foremost, let's take away all the smoke and mirror. Let's take away all the ego. Let's take away all the cute stuff. And let's ask ourselves very frankly, how would you like to be sold? How would you like for somebody to approach you? And again, as you said, it's not being chased around and pursued at some conference. It's not getting the private number phone call and then the next day it's the Queensland phone call and then the New South Wales phone call and you're changing all your different numbers. If anything, that's actually going to dramatically reduce the chances of you converting the sale at the back end. So I think first and foremost, if you're a sales professional or if you're a sales leader or if you're a CEO or a director of commercial outcomes, you need to slow down and say, hey, are we adding value to the journey? Am I putting my sales team in the best possible position that when it is time to open up dialogue, people already know who we are, they know what we do, they appreciate and they trust us because, we've added value to them along the way. And we're transparent about what we're good at and what we're not, right? So just that's the very first thing, right? Is you've got to say, have I added value to this person? And then from there, I think what you've really got to do as well is you've got to understand that you're not going to sell somebody on the first phone call. You're not going to cold call somebody, or meet somebody at the first time and just tell them absolutely everything about your solution, and then they're going to want to buy it, right? I just don't think people operate like that, right? I've never seen it. So then what ends up happening is it gets really awkward, right? You've got this professional, whether they're on the other side of a Zoom call, whether they're on the other side of a phone call, whether whether you've met them at a conference, and they're sitting there like, man, did this person really just try to pitch me their solution end to end and hoping for a follow-up call next week and, going to send me through some contracts? People are coming in too hot and heavy, and people need to
Oh,
chill out
it's
just a
too
little bit.
much. Oh, it's too much. It's overbearing.
Yeah. And here's the thing. I'm not here to criticize salespeople. I'm a sales guy. I love salespeople. Salespeople have a very, very, very tough job. And it's, and it's brutal because you go out there and you kill yourself to hit your KPIs, right? And then it starts all again the next day. It's not as if you're implementing something and then you can just kind of sit back and watch a screen, unless you're, purely in e-commerce, right? We're talking about, it's a really tough role. So you've got to understand is that when you chuck your sales guys into the deep end, right? And one thing I hate is I hate this sink or swim mentality. You're a salesperson. This is the mentality. You're a salesperson. It says so on your resume, right? So therefore, I don't need to do anything. Here's a bunch of phone numbers. Here's a bunch of prospects.
I have anxiety thinking about this.
Well, this is where I'm going with this, right? And go for it. And by the way, you've got a 90-day probation period.
Oh my God.
And if you're okay, we might extend it out to 180 days. And then after that, we might sign you on full time. So I'm going to try to avoid any profane language here. But when you do that to people and you chuck them in the deep end like that, and they've got to eat these, proverbial sandwiches, you're putting a tremendous level of anxiety into their system. All right. So we all know the pattern. You get a job. You post it on LinkedIn. I'm so happy to be a part of this organization and I can't wait. And I really believe in their solution. And then like, cool, I need you to get me a deal or 2 deals or do $100,000 worth of deals in the first 90 days. Yeah. And then this person all of a sudden goes from being really excited, inspired about their first role. And they go to like, holy crap, I just went from 90 days to 89 days to 80 days, 70 days. I haven't got a deal yet. What do you think that person's going to do? Right?
Desperate.
Desperate. And
it's so true though. That's why this is where it all starts. It's actually the companies putting pressure on these salespeople that are so desperate.
So what's the salesperson going to do with that pressure? They're going to transfer it. Who are they going to transfer it to?
The client. The
prospect, right? And all of a sudden get a lose scenario, right? Because the prospects had a terrible experience with your organization. I think we've all been in a situation where it's like we've inherited like a prospect or we've inherited an ex-client from like a previous rep and that person, and they'll give you some horror story about the negative experience they had with that person. Again, the prospect is losing, the salesperson is losing, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's the business that does not necessarily have the structure in place to support this salesperson. They think that this salesperson is just the unicorn. They're the ones that end up losing. And they lose in 2 or 3 different ways. Of course, they lose because they're not getting a deal, first and foremost. Secondly, they're losing because their brand equity has taken a hit and their reputation has taken a hit. There's organizations that, man, I don't want to call from that organization because those guys come on hot and heavy, right?
Absolutely. You're so right.
And here's the best part, right? You walk past that salesperson's desk at about the 90-day mark or depending on how long your probation period is or whatever, the 70-day mark. And, you start noticing those seek.com tabs in the browser, because they're like, man, I don't want this pressure. I'm doubting myself. So now the business has to then replace that person, right? Because they're out the door. There is a lot of turnover in IT sales or software as a service sales or in cybersecurity sales. The turnover is off the charts and people jump from one organization to another, which is, again, everybody loses. The business has lost 3 to 6 months worth of salary, but also they've lost the opportunity cost when their competitors who are doing it the right way are taking a bigger market share. Does that make sense? And then all of a sudden, you've got these, these poor cybersecurity professionals who are absolutely getting smashed at the moment, right? They're absolutely getting belted because everyone's working from home. So obviously we know that, with the increase in the surface area, It means you've got more on your plate. You've got more to consider. You've got to make sure people aren't opening weird emails from their home network and introducing something that can move laterally and, through the organization. And not only that, they don't necessarily have more budget. So they've got to do more with less. Yeah. Their teams are stretched thin as well. So all of a sudden now you're calling this person with this negative energy. They're absolutely stressed already. You're just adding to that stress. So you know what that cybersecurity professional is going to do? They're going to go with what they know, even if it's not necessarily the, how would you put it?
Best
The most
solution.
the best solution or the most revolutionary product, right? It's like, you know what? I've just got so much going on professionally, not even including what I've got going on personally, right? That I'm just going to stick with what I know. And it's tough because cybersecurity professionals that have to make these decisions, again, quite often they're not being approached the right way. They're not being approached respectfully. They do need to improve their programs. They might not even be happy with, the controls or the systems or the process that they have in place, but you haven't done enough to win their trust, because the other side of the coin is what you've said sounds good, but they don't really trust you. And, maybe they buy something off you in on a whim, and they're not informed. They've been kind of sold the dream. They haven't been sold in a transparent fashion, warts and all. And now that person's life got even harder. So I totally understand why cybersecurity professionals are absolutely fed up with the phone calls, while they're absolutely fed up with the way that they're being approached by these service and solution providers. And again, yeah, I think to be brutally honest, I think we can all be doing a better job to sell, particularly in cybersecurity.
And that's why I want to bring you on the show, to identify these are real issues. And I mean, I've seen people complain on LinkedIn. I've had chats with people, senior people. They just say they just feel bombarded and they feel overwhelmed by the amount of calls, emails, people just scheduling stuff into the calendar that was unsolicited. And they treat these people like pieces of meat,
Really?
right? Oh
That's a
yeah,
new
I've
one.
I've seen it all. I've seen it all. I mean, I've even seen people go to like people's husbands or wives to try to get to them that way. So I mean, people, they will go to all levels, man. Who knows?
Wow.
And
Okay.
so,
Okay.
look, we're not here to bash anyone. We're here to be like,
No,
this is
we're
a
not.
problem.
This is
This
a
is a
problem.
problem. And if people think that it's not, I honestly don't know. You've been living under a rock, because it is, and that's why there is frustration in the industry, and that's why deals can't get done, because the way in which certain people operate is old fashioned, it's antiquated, and frankly, it really just needs to stop. And that's why I wanted to bring you on here, because what can we do as an industry? I mean, you've come from this background, you understand. People need to hear it from you, right? I'm not a sales guy, so it's hard for me to speak about it. I mean, you and I share very similar views, but sometimes customers just think, oh, well, if I start marketing, I'm going to get a deal in like 5 minutes later. And that's not how it works.
No, no. So just to be really, really clear, at Sales Inc., we're not interested in lead generation, right? You need to generate your own leads. So what we typically do is work with these databases. Now, I know there are so many businesses out there that only do half the job, and that is come out and do your marketing, generate the lead. They generate the lead. They might send them one little bit of information, and then it's like, boom, here's our price sheet. Yeah. And then
But hang on, but just to jump in there, is the lead qualified? Because anyone can get a number from anyone, from mum and dad's fish and chip shop on Freshwater Beach, doesn't mean they're a lead.
exactly. And you know what? Some leads will be and some leads won't be qualified. You can't have 100% qualified leads. You're going to get some kid who's just left these details because he's got a uni assignment. Do you know what I mean? You're going to get you're going to get the taxi driver. No offense to taxi drivers. My dad was a taxi driver, but you're going to get the taxi driver who's looking for a career change and just downloading everything he can. That's normal. That's okay. You don't need to have a perfect database, right? So, but what you need to do is, and I'll tell you right now, because we keep meticulous levels of data. What you need to do is, once you've generated interest, once you've generated a lead, you've got to realize that you've only really done maybe half a job, maybe a third of the job. If I'm frank with you, you've really only done a third of the job, which is generate some interest. And for every 100 leads that you get, there's going to be 20 straight away that are a write-off. Like, you have to make friends with reality first and foremost, right? You have to understand, how brutal this game is. It's like a hot bath, so you can really ease into it and get comfortable in it, right? So that's the first thing. So where we step in, Carissa, is okay. You've done that. You've spent your marketing dollars. You thought just by spending the marketing dollars, as you put it earlier, that the leads are just going to start falling out of the sky and you can kind of sit back and put your sunnies on and kick your feet up. No, it doesn't work like that. What you need to do is once the people are in your database, you really need to really add value to them while very subtly introducing your narrative, what you stand for, and the problem that you actually solve. So I can tell you now, we find that before we even are able to have a half decent conversation with somebody, even the basic conversation that says, hey, I want to have a conversation with you about having a conversation with you, right? Which is like, pretty much just like, hey, I'd love to have a chat with you down the track, or if you've got 30 minutes up your sleeve down the track, whatever it might be. Before, whether you're doing that over the phone, whether you're doing that on LinkedIn, whatever it might be, we found that they typically engage with 2.5 blogs or 2.5 EDMs that are purely adding value, purely sharing insight. That's it.
Okay, so let's get into that for a second, because this is where I think people don't understand the difference between adding value and adding value, because they'll say, oh, look it up. They'll talk about themselves. They'll say, oh, we were listed in this thing and we won some award that no one cares about. So it's like all of these things, which is who cares? All these things which are talking about them, right? We want to focus on what do people get if they buy your stuff. So if you could elaborate on that.
I'll even take it a step back. I would say, first and foremost, you have to write something as their peer. You have to write something not as the salesperson, not as the marketing person. You need to put forward, whether it's whatever content, whether it's written, video, whatever. It doesn't need to be written, of course, but you need to write from their perspective. First and foremost, you need to relate to them, and you need to actually let them know that, hey, I'm in a similar position as you, right? First and foremost, and this is what I'm seeing. So kind of common challenge, right? But then this is what I'm actually doing to work around it, or this is what I'm doing to tackle it. Does that make sense? Now, what's incredible, so it's adding value 101, right? What's incredible to me is how little people do that. And they might do it once and they think that's enough. So you don't, and then all of a sudden, not only when you're doing that, then it's all of a sudden it's a case of, oh, and by the way, here's my product, buy it, buy it, buy it, buy it. You don't need to come on so hot and heavy. You just need to, it's like you have to earn your place in their brain. You have to earn that real estate in their mind. And, you've got to add value. You've got to write. What you also need to do, if we're now going to talk not just about feel-good stuff, but actual practical stuff, I'm a big believer that if you're creating content and you are distributing it and you're adding value, you need to also be able to monitor who is engaging with that value, right? And you need to be very, very specific about how you categorize that and how you organize that. So if I've got, John the CISO and he's open 2 content pieces, I need to know that. I need to know the last time he engaged with something. I need to know that, what in particular he engaged with. And then if I've got, Sarah, the CISO, then, and she's not engaging with anything and she's not having a bar of it, or she opened one email and she's not interested in them anymore, or she watched one video and she's not interested anymore, then I also need to categorize that accordingly. So when, adding value and introducing content to people and introducing your solution, talking about common problems, how you solve those problems and all the rest of it, yes, that's good, but you also have to manage that data, right? And then all of a sudden what you start establishing is who knows me, who's engaged, okay? Then you say, and who just right now is a high probability they are not interested in hearing from me. They've got other stuff going on, right? And that is, I would say, the very, very first step to segmenting your audience, adding value to your audience, segmenting your audience, and reducing the pain for everybody, reducing the pain of the sales rep, reducing the pain of the cybersecurity professional, who's getting a random phone call from an organization he's never heard of, and of course, at the end of the day, reducing the pain of the business that is providing the solution, because at the end of the day, it's those people, it's the businesses that actually suffer in the long run. So that's my first tip. From there, again, now you know, hey, who's engaging, who's not, and what we find is again, 2.5 content pieces. That's the average, before we can even have a conversation about having a conversation, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think you're so right. I mean, I see this every day. And I like going back to people talking about themselves a lot. And I was like to clients or people out there, and I'm like, just writing this is not going to get you your outcome. No one actually cares about you specifically or your organization. So it's really about removing that ego, right? Like, how do you help these people? What does that mean specifically as well? Like, yes, okay, your product does X, Y, and Z, and it does these cool things, but it's like, people buying it are not looking at it from that perspective. So I think people really need to take themselves out of I'm the salesperson, put themselves how a customer would look to engage this product, if they were to buy it, how would they look to do due diligence and quality assurance on the product or whatever it is. And I think that's the way people need to approach this, because it's still happening out there and it's gotten worse because of COVID. I mean, I've had people call me up stressed to be like, I can't hit my sales number. I can't go out and meet people. And I think sometimes companies just think, okay, I'm going to go out, I'm going to hire 10 sales dudes. They're going to be on 150K base plus OT or 300 or whatever it is. And then 6 months later, they're out the door. And then they start the same process again. So I want to get into how can you, there's a company out there that perhaps they don't have a sales team or they've got one guy, like what would be your approach to potentially saving these businesses money about doing it properly and doing it effectively? Because, you don't need 50 cooks in the kitchen because you don't know who's cooking anything at the end of the day. So I want people to understand how to be smart about this as well, and not sort of just shoot from the hip and think having more people out there will equal more sales, because that is fundamentally not true.
No, and just to give you an idea, the reason we're able to offer sales as a service, the reason I'm able to have this podcast with you today, and I'm not out there on the street begging for change, is because one of our reps essentially can handle not three different solutions, but three different businesses, right? And the reason I can get one rep that can handle three different clients and different businesses is, and without them being stressed. As a matter of fact, they get healthier, right? The reason they're able to do that and hit their mandates is very, very, very simple. The way you perceive your salespeople needs to change, okay? They are just not these racehorses or these greyhounds that you can whip and whip and whip and whip, okay? And they're just going to keep running and running and running and running. People don't work like that, right? What you actually need to do is you need to, first of all, respect that you've actually got a person there, not a sales superhero, okay? And salespeople also do it to themselves a bit. They come in and they position themselves as these, super high energy sales heroes and all the rest of it. And it's just like, hey, listen, everybody just chill out. At the end of the day, I just need you to be a pragmatic professional that comes in every single day and executes day in, day out. But what I believe the organization has an obligation to do to achieve that, and what a sales director might need to do to achieve that is you actually need to create the sequences. You actually need to create the process and the steps. You've got to be realistic and say, hey, just because you've got a number in a database, it doesn't mean that we're going to be able to call it cold, set a meeting, give them a hell of a Zoom presentation in 30 minutes when they've got a million other things. They're probably even dealing with a breach. They probably just can't even tell you. They're dealing with all sorts of crazy stuff. And then all of a sudden, from there, we'll send you a quote and we'll just sit back and wait. And then you go back to your boss and you say, that should be a deal at the end of the quarter. And the end of the quarter comes and absolutely nothing's happened. And you call back this person and they're just ghosting your phone calls. But we've got to ditch this approach. Okay. What you've got to do is you've got to break down every single step. You've also got to empower your salespeople by letting them know what you need to do and say at every single step of the process. What is the goal, okay, at every single step? So I'll give you an example. I talked about writing content. So we write content in a specific way where it's short, sharp, to the point. Quite often we don't make people click through. You put the content there in the body of the email and we're able to track who's engaged with that. Pretty simple stuff, right? And that doesn't cost money. I mean, you go and get yourself a MailChimp if you don't have any. I think it's totally free. And you can see who's opening your stuff, who's engaging with it, what they're clicking on, all the rest of it, right? It's really stock standard stuff. Okay, now you've got this person's this person's phone number, because they did leave it with you once upon a time, right? When they're interested in doing something, or they downloaded some sort of report, or whatever it is that they do. What is the expectation on that first phone call? Okay, so you've got to understand that, yes, we still do need to make phone calls or send messages to people and ask for meetings. Unfortunately, that's part of it. And I know that is a problem for IT professionals, just getting bombarded by phone calls every day. So you've got to be realistic about that. And no matter how good you think your solution is, if you think it's the best thing since sliced bread, you can't just pick up the phone and call somebody because they've opened one email and then pitch them end to end. So what we always try to do is be extremely respectful of the professional. You've got to understand that, and you've got to have a mentality that they've left their details with you. You've got to cherish that. That's gold. It's not only that it's worth something, and obviously leads are worth something, but this person is giving you their personal information, right? It's like there's something sacred about that, especially in this day and age. So you have to respect it. And when you first touch base with that person, you need to understand that they really don't want to hear what you've got to say. But if you can remind them that you already do have a pre-existing relationship and they have engaged with a whole bunch of your content historically, and there is a problem in the industry that they may or may not face, because don't condescend these people either. Don't assume just because you solve a problem that they have this problem. Okay, I think that's really what frustrates these cybersecurity professionals. Cybersecurity professionals know what they're doing. Yeah, they know. They're not making things up. Yeah. So when you come in and you condescend them on the first phone call and tell them you're going to make their life 100 times, it's just so off-putting, right? So the first thing I always say is politely ask if you can present something to them for this purpose. Now, the worst case scenario is they'll say no, but because you've been respectful and you've added value along the journey, they're not going to tell you to F away. They're not going to hang the phone up on you and complain. And what's actually going to happen is, even if they're not interested, you've at least preserved the relationship. Quite often, I know cybersecurity professionals get a rap for being, annoyed. But quite often, if you take a respectful approach with them and you treat them as a person, they'll treat you as a person right back. Now, the benefit of that is it actually sustains you for one more day, right? You don't go home feeling like absolute crap. Now, you might still go home feeling tired, because I acknowledge that it's exhausting. But you're not going to go home feeling crap. You're not going to go home feeling terrible about yourself. So the sales professional, but also the organizations driving these strategies, need to understand that there's no one-shot kills in this game, right? You have to be pragmatic. The next thing you want to do is, again, then maybe from there, depending on the type of product and all the rest of it, because there's all sorts of different products. Some sales cycles are longer than others. But then what you're really trying to do is let them know, the problem that you solve and how that problem makes that individual's life easier. Okay. So it's pretty interesting, because a lot of the time when people are selling cyber solutions or IT solutions or, SaaS platforms, whatever it might be, they come in and they just talk about how awesome the platform is, right? And then they talk about actually how awesome not only the platform is, but how it's going to make their business better, right? But what about me? What about the individual that's got to sit here and implement all this stuff? What about me, the individual that's in meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, and I don't have time to sit down and scratch myself and set any of this stuff up. So what you've also got to do is you've also got to kind of take the time to let this person know how it's going to make their job easier, their life better. Because what I find is, if the CISO is having a better time, if the CISO is, or the CISO, depending on where you are, if they're having a better time in their role, then programs actually improve, right? We know that behind every good cyber strategy is leadership, right? And communication and a strong team. So what I'm always looking to do is say, okay, this is the problem that we're trying to solve. Do you face this problem? If you do, great. If you don't, I fully take that on board and I respect your feedback. I'm not going to try to shove a square peg into a round hole. Okay, awesome. Now, hey, this is the problem that we'll solve for your organization. This is why we're motivated to do it. But just as importantly, this is the problem it's going to solve for you in your role, and this is how it's going to empower you and your team. And in return, actually, you're going to get this amplifying, compounding effect on your program, as opposed to here's a tool, plug it in, and people will stop sniffing your port, or people will stop, trying to send you phishing emails, or you know what I mean. You've got to really think on a more holistic level, and you've got to ask yourself, how do I deliver these messages in a sequential fashion to get down to business? So segment your sales process, be mindful of the experience that somebody's having on the other end, and don't try to have a one-shot kill. There are no silver bullets. Yes, I get it. Sometimes you have a hell of a meeting and someone of you wants to do something straight away. But that's probably sometimes that's the worst thing that can happen to you, because it sets this false expectation that you can do it day in, day out. And businesses need to understand that sales processes take time, and that if we can just focus on not pressuring our teams and not pressuring our prospects, but actually being methodical in delivering a message and engaging the people who want to be engaged, and throughout the whole process, maintain your integrity by respecting the other person, it's incredible the results that you get.
No, I love that. I think that's so important. And that's the other thing that perplexes me is this stuff takes time, right? And I'll jump into that in a second. But a really quick question for you. There are obviously companies out there you can buy databases with people's phone numbers. Do people honestly think that I get Noah from, I don't know, X companies, a CISO, if I call him up randomly, he doesn't know who the hell I am, that he's A, going to listen to me, B, even look at what I have to sell, and then C, even close a deal like that? Surely that must be rare. Like, yeah, it probably may happen, but I would say that's pretty low.
Yeah, list buying, it seems to be a thing. People are always buying a list. Oh, we've bought this list. We've bought this.
But they think that that's gold. They think that is like the euphoria moment. Like, I've got a list. I've got people's. I actually think if you do that and you call 50 people in that list, you've actually just burned all your bridges.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. So what you've got to do is, and even if, I don't know, like, I don't know how you really buy a list really legally, to be honest with you. I'm not sure about the ins and outs of that. But even if, let's say you have a list, okay, for argument's sake, and you're in this bind now, because it's like, I've either got to cold call them or send them an unsolicited email, right? So it's like, okay, like you're literally just setting yourself up for a really, really hard time. And, you'll be lucky if you don't act. And I can see now why there's so many complaints out there. So what you actually need to do is find out where your audience is. And I know this is something that you do really, really, really well. And build it the old-fashioned way, right? If you build your audience the old-fashioned way by adding value, inspiring them to want to give you their information, what we find is that instead of your database converting at a 2% rate, right? For every 100 people that we smash, we're going to get 2 deals and 2 complaints, and then everybody else, whatever. What you actually start finding, and what we found, is that your database can actually convert at about a 10% rate within 12 to 18 months, if not higher, right? And, ultimately, yes, it's a slower cycle. It's a slower process than the one you have in your head, but it's actually a shorter cycle with a higher conversion rate. Now, when I say 12 to 18 months...
And it's preserving the brand, right?
Well, not even preserving the brand, it's amplifying the brand, right? Because you're doing things the right way. So, I told you that, just to go back a step, I told you at the start of this podcast that we were selling property to people who had never met us before. Now, high risk approach, and when I mentioned this to my business partners at the time, as opposed to taking the, hey, let's hold a seminar, bring everybody in, lock the doors, and turn up the heat, and don't let them leave unless they buy, we said, no, we're going to give people the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt that if I give them everything that they need to know, right, and it is in line with their objective, right, and every cybersecurity professional worth their weight, right, or worth their salt, has an objective. They know what the crown jewels are. They know what they're trying to do with their program, right? Now, they're not always going to tell you their objective, but if you can kind of respect that they have an objective, try to add value that helps them meet their objective, then all of a sudden, those people they might not buy straight away. But the next salesperson that comes in and tries to pressure them without any regard for their objective, without any respect for their time, guess what? That person has eliminated themselves out of the game by default. So what we used to get is people would come back and buy from us by default because it was like, dude, I've spoken to 5 other people. They were not transparent. They were just pressuring me. They didn't allow me to do my due diligence. They did not really even offer a solution or position the solution in a way that was in line with what I'm trying to achieve. Like, I'm going to go with you. So we have to start giving people and professionals the benefit of the doubt that if we give them insights and if we give them solutions that are aligned to where they're at professionally, aligned to what the business is trying to achieve, aligned to some of the challenges that they face day to day, there's a high probability, or relatively high, I should say, probability, that they will come back to you when the time is right. And I find it really hard, I personally find it really hard to believe that cybersecurity professionals are going to drop everything that they're doing, right, and buy something brand new, off the shelf, at a moment's notice, when they've already spent a ton of money in the last financial year or in the last calendar year, and they've got to see that through. So as good as your idea is, or as good as your solution is, you have to be realistic. These people are invested. So what you will need to keep doing is, even if that person is not ready to buy, continue to add value. Do you know what I mean? Continue to take a respectful approach. Continue to nurture them, if that's the word you want to use. And I assure you, when the time is right, and if you've got enough trust, again, at least behind your image, because frankly speaking, I think not a lot of people really invest in their image, prior to their sales process. That's a story for another day. But if you've done those things, when that person is back at the top of their buying cycle, they will reach out to you. So we have to be realistic, and we have to understand that if you're going to sell a solution in this space, let it breathe, give it time. That is the cost of doing business. When you're selling SaaS, when you're selling an IT solution, or when you're selling a cybersecurity solution or service, that is the cost of business. Is that you need to be able to hang in there, and you need to be able to add value. So that's my take on it. That's my experience, and that's what we've seen work for us. If somebody else has a better way to do it, I'm all ears. But this is our mentality.
Love all that. Totally agree. This is what I say to people day in, day out. Sort of what I'd like to sort of touch on now is the operative word that you said is be realistic, right? So, I mean, I've spoken to startups that got funding, startups that are bootstrapped, mid-sized companies that are around for 40 years, 100 years, large enterprises, multinational business, work with them all got different, same sort of problem. We need sales, all that type of stuff. The problem is different, right? So what I want to understand is for people, I've spoken to startups and then they're like, okay, we need to get sales and all that type of stuff. I said, it's going to take time. You've been around 5 minutes. No one knows you. No one cares who you are. You've been around 5 minutes. No one is just going to buy your stuff straight out of the gate. So I think there really needs to be a wake-up call that there needs to be time to get that up and running, right? So I am curious to sort of understand, what's your sort of impression on that? Because this stuff that people sell, isn't cheap. It's not like selling a candle where they're $5 or $30. It's not like that, right?
Yeah.
And it's commoditized, and you can get a candle anywhere. So you know what I mean? And so the sales cycle is extended now. It used to be 12 months. Now, if you're looking at an enterprise, you're looking anywhere between 12, 18, even 24 months now from people that I've spoken to. So I think people are really unrealistic that, yes, their product may be good, but you're not just going to wake up one day and all of a sudden you're an A-list celebrity. This is what I think people think.
Yes.
That actors take 20 years to become an A-list actor. And so I think that there's this fallacy, right? So I really want to explore that, because this is something that I see day in, day out, and people's expectations need to be aligned.
Absolutely. And again, that expectation, the business owner or, the director of the department, whatever it might be, they need to be realistic about that, and they need to understand that, right? And the funny thing is, when you actually have this mentality where you recalibrate your expectations, right, and you're realistic about it, and you're actually just saying, okay, listen, we're realistic about how long this could take. Yeah. Um, but we're also, but we're also going to stay in the moment and execute step by step by step by step by step. What I tend to find is deals actually tend to happen quicker anyway when you do that. Again, purely because you've got somebody else out there with, we call it commission breath. You've got somebody out there with commission breath, and you can always smell somebody's commission breath, and they're just kind of saying,
Oh my
not
God, what the
interested.
hell is that? What is
Yeah.
that? Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So, people can tell when somebody's just purely trying to sell them, of course, for, for their comms. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah.
How this one, I know all the cybersecurity professionals can relate to this. How many phone calls do you get, in the last week of end of financial year? How many phone calls do you get in the last week of the quarter because somebody's got to hit their sales metrics? So we've got to remove that first and foremost, and we've got to say, hey, listen, these things do take time. We're going to build out a process of which we're going to kind of introduce our narrative to these organizations and actually get to a point where we can ask them if we can do business. And that, again, I'll tell you, I guess I'll tell you the 7 pillars of what I believe, and this is probably a good time to take your pencil out. I guess the 7 pillars behind how you can kind of add value, share your story without getting stale, nurture your audience, build trust, over the length of that cycle, right? There's 7 things that you need to know, and that whether you're doing it by email, whether you're doing it by webcast, whether you're doing a video, whatever it might be, there's 7 things that you need to touch on. The challenge is this, though: you can't touch them on all of them at once. You've got to kind of stagger these things out, and you can't, you can't deliver this information in a way that's long-winded and not digestible, right? You've got to deliver digestible content and digestible insights in a timely manner. So the 7 things that we're always looking to introduce and to help get the narrative out there over that 6 to 18 month period, let's say, are the business philosophies and motives. Okay, quite often people are not sharing their philosophies and motives. What they're trying to do is come in and saying, we've got this thing that does this technical stuff. Yeah. But they're not actually coming out and saying, hey, you know what? There is this problem out there, and we are so passionate about solving this problem. And this is, but before I even get into the problem, um, these are our philosophies, these are our motives, this is how we view the world. Does that make sense? Align people to your perspective. The second thing we want to do then is actually talk about the problem you solve. Now, the problem you solve is not the solution that you sell. They're 2 very, very different things. Quite a lot of cybersecurity solutions, they do a bunch of cool technical stuff, but again, a lot of the problems they solve revolve around improving operational efficiency, creating more transparency, helping you report a little bit easier, allowing you to manage something, and while saving time, for example. So, what is the actual problem that you solve? Let's talk about that problem. Let's relate over that problems. People love problems. So let's talk about that problem, and I'll tell you what I would do if or when I encounter the same problem. So what you're actually also doing is you're kind of normalizing the problem, and that's great because people don't feel so alienated by having to face this problem. It's incredible how many, when we're speaking to cyber professionals and cyber leaders, man, like they're all suffering from the same 2 or 3 problems, right? And at the center of that is this burnout, this fatigue, that's coming from something. And it's your job to find out what that something is, and just be mindful that the problem that you solve is not what you're trying to sell. Now, before you even get into the technical deliverables of what you sell, you need to understand your points of difference, okay, your unique selling points. So quite often when you're creating a product or you're creating a cyber solution or creating a service, you're in this vacuum and you're in this echo chamber, okay? And it happens all the time. It still happens to us over here, right? And you keep getting the same feedback. You hear the same thing over and over and over. and you think it's awesome and you think it's fantastic, but quite often you haven't really taken the time to see what alternatives are out there that actually attempt to solve the same problem. Okay. Now, what you need to do is actually understand what your points of difference are, or what your unique selling points are. What are those specific points of difference, Carissa? You understand? So I'm selling some 2FA plugin. You're selling a 2FA plugin. What's the difference between mine and yours? As opposed to just coming in and saying, Carissa, I've got this 2FA plugin. It's really, really cheap and it's really, really, really good. And if you don't have 2FA, you're going to get a breach and da 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 da. And if you get a breach, your life's over, right? We've got to come out and say, hey, listen, there's a lot out there. I understand that. Ours does this a little bit differently. It solves this problem. Is that a problem that you have? Would you like to find out more? That's in a nutshell, of course, I'm giving you. There's a big difference with your approach. And that's why understanding your unique selling points is important. Only after that, okay, then you really can start talking about the technicalities behind it. Because the technicalities don't really matter. If it solves a problem, it solves a problem. Does that make sense? But people, of course, need to do their due diligence and find out about the technicalities. So I would put that at number 4. Does that make sense? I wouldn't even put that at number 1. From there, and again, I think maybe you'll agree with me here, Carissa. Maybe you'll disagree. But a lot of IT sales professionals, they've got great technical knowledge, but not much else in terms of trying to build that, or the skills to build an interpersonal relationship with their prospect. And they're just so focused on what they do technically. And they're extremely bright, a lot brighter than I am when it comes to this stuff. But do you find that that's a common problem?
For technical people, yes. For salespeople, I find some of them actually don't even know what they're selling and they sell the wrong product. Heard that multiple times.
Fair enough.
So
that goes back to the problem, right? Sorry, go ahead.
So I've seen the inverse then as well. But yes, generally technical people focus on the technical stuff. And I always say this. Why? Because they're technologists. They studied this stuff. They love it. They live and breathe it. That's their whole world. They understand why they are what they are. And then sometimes you bring in a salesperson that doesn't quite understand the product, doesn't quite understand the problem the customer has. That's where the big disconnect is. So I think they need to have a bit more of a technical understanding to sell that very well. That's why usually your pre-sales guys are very important.
And again, pre-sales guys, that's part of a process. A lot of organizations don't have a pre-sales person. Does that make sense? And a lot of organizations are not actually even putting the pre-sales person in a position to succeed by nurturing that audience prior to the pre-sales call. Does that make sense? So I'm 100% with you on that. I would say number 5 is be very clear about how to get started. A lot of cybersecurity professionals don't want to give something a go because it's too hard to implement or it's too hard to sell to the CFO. Okay, so you've got to be clear about not only how it's going to benefit you and your organization and position it in a way, of course, we all know that it's got to get by the CFO, 4 out of 5 times. But how easy is it to get started? That includes, from a pricing standpoint, how easy is that to absorb? From a technical standpoint, how easy is it to, plug and play or set up or import or merge? And how are you actually, throughout that process, how are you actually going to ensure that you're not compounding the problem of that cyber leader or that CISO? Does that make sense? Because if it's like you might have the best thing and they're actually really sold, but it's a clunky integration or it's a clunky process, you're going to kill the deal 9 out of 10 times there. So that's my the fifth thing that we do. And you can actually write about these things. You can actually give people insights about how to implement new technology. You've got to be you don't just want to be pushing your agenda. Again, adding value means even stepping outside of the realm of what you sell. And then number 6 out of 7 is be transparent about your guarantees and risks. Now, cyber is really interesting because the second you start making guarantees, the second somebody's going to call BS, because we know that there's no silver bullet in cyber. But what other guarantees can you offer? Can you offer a service level guarantee in regards to your response time, or you have some sort of service level agreement where you'll get back to them within 24 hours? Be very careful about what you guarantee, but if you can guarantee it. But also just as importantly, be very transparent about the risks. So bringing this back to what I was saying earlier, you will win by default, right, if you don't have to handle objections, right? I just want to say this, I'm not into objection handling, okay? I think objection handling it means you've been lazy, right? It means that um, you've cut straight to the chase, you've gone straight to the punchline, and this person is now, you haven't explained everything clearly in a digestible manner. Something's gone over their head, something hasn't been articulated, and now they're saying, well, Carissa, what about this? Carissa, what about that? Carissa, what about, what if this happens? What if that happens? You should be so clear about that person is not asking those questions, and that's going to result in two things, right? It's going to reduce the length of the sales cycle, because quite often a cyber professional, they're very polite. I'm going to say, like, when they're kind of the very polite ones, what they'll do is they won't tell you that they think your product is risky. They'll just maybe drag things out a little bit, and you know what, hey, why not? They've got no obligation to do business with you. You have to remember that as well. So if you're transparent about the risks, they can assess these risks and weigh that up. You got to remember, these professionals assess risk for a living. Yeah. So let them know what the risks are, have enough respect for them that they can navigate through that risk. And they'll come back to you and say, hey, Liz, listen, the risks outweigh the pros for us. Okay. And if you can get some feedback on regards to that, take the feedback on board, go back and improve your sales process. But don't sit there and just say, oh, I'm going to handle this objection, handle this objection, handle this objection. Because now that person has moved away from a buying mode into, like we're objecting against one another. We're literally having an argument. I don't usually see deals get done on arguments, right? And not in the Southern Hemisphere anyway, just as in my little caveat earlier. So be transparent about that. And when you are transparent about the risk, people will appreciate it. They can assess their own risk. But of course, you don't want to close on risk, right? So never forget to talk about the key people in your department, in your organization that make your business credible. And I think what we're not seeing enough of is people take the leap to share their story, share again their philosophies and their motives, share their history, and kind of build that credibility. So as a business owner, you also have an obligation to give your credentials or your credibility to your sales reps so they can take that in the market. Because quite often that sales rep is not, again, the mistake is that they try to sell themselves. That's the old way of thinking, well, you're really just selling yourself, mate. Those ones. And it's like, no, you're really trying to solve a problem. Okay. And what you're actually trying to do is sell a vision, and what you're actually trying to really do is sell people that they should trust you, right? So don't ever, take the time to understand who the key people in your organization are, why they're credible, what their business philosophies and motives are, the problem that they solve, what makes the nature of that solution unique. So what are your unique selling points? From there, get a deep understanding of the technical deliverables, be very, very clear about how you start, and make it easy for somebody to start, and be totally transparent about your guarantees and your risks. And do that in a segmented, digestible manner. Be realistic about sales cycles, manage your data, add value, and be transparent at all times. And again, just to wrap that little, just to wrap everything we've been talking, just to wrap that up, that's how it all ties into one another. Whether you're doing it by email, whether you're doing it by LinkedIn messages, whether you're doing it by phone calls, respect these people. Don't try to sell them everything at once, and just move in a sequential, pragmatic fashion, and you will win the race.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. That's the approach people who are listening absolutely need to take and implement within their organization. And I also just want to put also a caveat as well. We're not here to talk smack about other people. We're here because this is a problem in the industry. We're trying to solve it. We're trying to address it. We're trying to speak realistically about the issues that we see. Not all salespeople are like this. Some are, some aren't, but there's good and bad in everyone, right? No matter what you do. So I just wanted to clear that up, that this is not us talking down to people.
Yeah.
This is us trying to solve a problem, because I'm getting their clients that people are selling to, they're coming to me and complaining. So I'm trying to speak to people like you, Ed, to be like, you're educating people on how to do sales better so everyone wins, right?
Well, I'm with you, Carissa. Look, I'm not here to bash anybody. I'm just here to give it a reality check to the space. And if anything, if any of my my sales brothers or sisters are tuned into this one, what I really care about is not kind of coming up here and preaching. But man, like all, getting deals done aside, all of our mental health is on the line here, Carissa, right? I think we've all felt crap in a sales job. We've all felt pressure in that sales role. I think we've all been sold a dream as well. I think we've all had a bad sales experience with somebody trying to sell us something where we really, like, you legitimately feel violated. You feel really awkward about the approach that that person has taken, and it puts you off. It really rubs you the wrong way. Even they're not listening to your feedback, they're not taking it on board, they're just handling objections. But also as a business owner, right, I know that running a business is stressful, and I know that running a business takes a toll on everything: your health, your family, your life, right? And that's part of the formula of running a business, which is how do I improve as a person? So yeah, my standpoint has always been that the reason I do carry on about this stuff is because and what we always say is there is a healthier way for all of us, to do business. And we can get caught, we have a choice. We can create vicious cycles, right? Or we can create a process that comes full circle. Okay. And we need to look at sales in a very circular fashion as opposed to looking at sales in a linear fashion. And if we do that and we're mindful about the cycles that we're creating for ourselves, for our business, for our prospects, for our clients, like I said earlier, we're going to go home, we're going to feel better. You're going to have maybe a little bit less to drink, or maybe you're not going to order that binge food or that junk food that that makes you feel better. I love some French fries after a stressful day. Do you know what I mean? So I'm human as well. I go through it as well. And what it's all about is just making sure that when we go home, yes, you're probably going to be tired. I get it, but at least you're not going to be defeated. If that makes sense, you're not going to feel kicked in the guts, and you're going to wake up tomorrow and you're going to come in with that high energy. And I'm not saying that cheesy high energy that you see in movies, but that's that high energy within yourself, knowing that that you're making progress. Does that make sense? So yeah, for me, sorry about that little rant, but it's all about doing business in a healthier way, so we can all kind of wake up and fight another day. Because I'll tell you now, I hate to say this. I've seen a lot of IT salespeople and SaaS salespeople. And I've seen them really fall into some bad traps, some bad habits. You have a long day. You have one beer that becomes two beers, three beers, so on and so forth. Boozy lunches get a little bit longer. Substance abuse is a real thing in sales, right? So we just believe that that needs to be eliminated as well. So if anybody's hearing this, and if you can relate to that, fantastic. You're not alone. If you can't relate to it, that's cool as well. But that's where we're coming from, and that's what we've seen a lot of in this game.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And that's what this show is about, to get real answers to real questions. So, Ed, thank you so much for coming on the show. We definitely went into a topic that I've always wanted to speak about intelligently. So I believe a lot of people will derive a lot of value out of this. If people perhaps have a question for you that I didn't ask you, even though I did ask you a lot of questions, how can they go about getting in contact with you?
Well, pretty easy. So I'm sure you'll share my LinkedIn. I'm not super duper active on LinkedIn, guys. I know that sounds contradictory, and that's because we've been fortunate enough that our approach has just generated a lot of organic interest, and really resonates with people. And as I said, our team kind of acts as sales mercenaries, so we do kind of lay low and respect the privacy of our clients. But you can always send me a DM on LinkedIn, or you can email us at info@salesinc.com.au. Just attention that to Ed, and ask me any question you like. Like I said, first and foremost, I want to add value. I want to help salespeople. Whether you've been selling for 10 years and you've hit a rut, 20 years and you've hit a rut, whether it's your first sales gig, if you're a commercial director and you've got inconsistency throughout your team, and now you're actually spending more time putting out fires than you are celebrating wins, I guarantee you that there's something that I can probably share with you that will reduce those common problems that you have on your sales floor. Because I want to say this to all the sales managers out there as well. I know that a lot of you are dealing predominantly with team politics every day, okay? Because someone's complaining about leads, somebody's getting more deals than the other person, whatever it is, all the shenanigans that take place there. That's a real thing as well. And if you feel that you're spending more time putting out fires and being a psychologist than you are actually inspiring your team, celebrating wins, coaching them through each stage of the process and empowering them, hey, feel free to reach out. I'm not going to try to sell you anything, but I'm happy to give you advice.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Ed, and I can't wait to get you back for another episode on the cybersecurity sales bandwagon.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Carissa, and again, I hope it's been of help to anyone that's been able to hang in for this long and listen to it all the way through. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope that you found today's episode useful and you took away a few key points. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to get our latest episodes. If you'd like to find out how KBI can help grow your cyber business, then please head over to kbi.digital.
This podcast was brought to you by KBI.media, the voice of cyber.